World War II shaped the lives of a generation. The war broke families apart, brought communities together, and turned a depressed economy into an industrial machine. On the home front, citizens sold war bonds and collected scrap metal for the factories. Friends were made and lost as a generation of boys was sent into combat. Penn State Public Broadcasting invited those who lived this history to share their stories of World War II.
My name is Roger Way, W-A-Y. I grew up on a farm just 12 miles here from State College in Half Moon Valley, which is at Stormstown. And you may have heard of the Way Fruit Farm. Well, I was born and raised on the Way Fruit Farm. And it was a working farm with dairy and emphasis on fruit growing. And so it was ordinary farm life. I was a conscientious objector during World War II, and I was drafted into a conscientious objectors camp for 4 years during the war. I'm a Quaker, and as you know, Quakers are pacifists, and I hold that philosophy personally myself. I'm a Quaker, I'm a pacifist. I think that war is totally immoral, and to go out and shoot somebody is just totally unbelievable to me. And so this is the reason I took this position. To be a conscientious objector, you object to participating in war. And of course, it goes along with the whole philosophy of life, of doing good things for other people and that sort of thing. Well, as you know, the selective service system had certain classifications. Most soldiers who went into the Army were classified 1A, and people who had physical difficulties and were incapable of going into the Army were classified as 4F. Well, just above 4F was 4E, and 4E means conscientious objector, and that's the classification that I was put into. So I was a graduate student here at Penn State, and I was put into the classification in the 4E by the Center County Selective Service Committee. And from there, I was drafted on May 15th, 1942, and my mother drove me to the bus station here in State College, and you asked me where did I serve. I went on the bus from State College to Baltimore, and the camp that I was headed for was a place called Patapsco. It was just west of Baltimore. And I arrived there in this camp, which was being administered by the Quakers. There were three peace churches, the Quakers and the Mennonites and the Church of the Brethren. And this particular camp that I was in was administered by the Quakers. And there were about 100 draftees there at the time when I first went there. Then I was there only a month, and after that I was transferred to another camp at Laurel and Bowie, Maryland, which is halfway between Baltimore and Washington, and that's where I spent the rest of the 4 years. The camp that I went into was a part of the United States Department of Agriculture has a large research station in Beltsville, Maryland. And part of that research station is the United States Forest Service. And part of the program for the United States Forest Service is doing research in forestry. So my job, I was assigned to be a research assistant to forest research scientist in this research station. And because of my training here in horticulture at Penn State with a master's degree, it was a perfect fit for me to join and be an assistant to a scientist. There are about 12,000 in the United States conscientious objectors went to this type of camp. And so there were probably 100 camps around the country. And this particular camp that I was in had about 60 conscientious objectors, I guess. The conscientious objector program was administered under the selective service system. And one of the things that the selective service system definitely came out in a statement was doing work, I'm quoting them now, doing work of national importance. So that was my assignment, to do work of national importance. Absolutely no pay. These programs were administered by the three Peace churches. My particular program was under the Quakers. And the Quakers gave us $2.50 a month while we were there. But otherwise, we got absolutely nothing. But we were conscientious workers, and so it didn't influence our production. I went to the office, just as many people do, 8 o'clock in the morning, and reported to the research scientist that I was working with, and he laid out the program for the day. And this was doing research on forest trees and a lot of forest tree planting, young seedlings, what type of treatments are best for the seedlings to make them grow best. I had done this sort of work in my own research here at Penn State in horticulture, very similar to the forest work. The selective service boards sometimes rejected a conscientious objector for his application of that program. If he didn't belong to one of the peace churches, they might have more difficulty, and they would have to present their case in writing, as I did too. But some of it were turned down, and if they had strong enough conviction to still be a conscientious objector, they would go to prison instead of going to the military. But in my case, I came from a Quaker community, and the service board never brought me before the board for an interview. It wasn't a prison in any sense, except that it had to be there, right? And without pay. We had nothing to restrain us there except the idea that we had to be there. I mean, any one of us could have walked out, and of course they would have been eventually caught and put into prison, but none of my colleagues, none of my fellow COs there left. Well, I'd like to give credit to some of my fellow conscientious objectors who spent their time in mental hospitals as attendants. Those conscientious objectors together developed a new system of handling of patients using kindness and all sorts of techniques which weren't ordinarily used in mental hospitals. And so even today, that sort of treatment is being followed in mental hospitals. While I was at the camp, my boss, who was a research scientist in forestry, he and I published a paper together, a research paper together, which helped me get a job at Cornell. After I left the conscientious objectors camp in 1946, I volunteered to go to China with the American Friends Service Committee to do relief work. So I was in China for 2.5 years working with the peasants there doing relief work. Then when I came back here to Penn State and went back to see my old professors, and I asked them if there horticulture jobs open, and they pointed a job opening in New York State at Cornell University. And so I went to Cornell, and they hired me, and I was a professor at Cornell University for 50 years. I personally, fortunately, never had too much confrontation about my philosophy. Some of my fellow COs in camp, when they went home for Christmas or when they were on furlough, just for a trip back to Colorado, wherever they lived, they would hitchhike back because there wasn't much public traffic, and it was cheaper too. Yes, when going such a far long distance, they had problems with the drivers that they were riding with. Get in arguments about how to treat people and that sort of thing. Well, I can see there were good parts about it, but of course I think it would never have happened if everybody had been a CO, because there would have been negotiation and resistance and everything to stop that sort of military confrontation is just unbelievable. And even, of course, it holds even today.